Well, number one, I just approach it as human relationships. I'm authentically interested in getting to know people. I honestly will say, if you happen to be in a front office, I don't want to just be a taker. I don't want the relationship to be purely transactional. Why wouldn't you want to know people? I think one of the greatest things about being in baseball, Jay, whether it's team side like you or media side like me, it's just the people you meet. There's so many interesting people that work in this game. Interesting human beings from all over the world and different stories. So I like to get to know people first to the point where maybe it's like, oh my God, can you please confirm for me that you just signed Justin Verlander or whoever? No, it's like, hey, we're already talking. We're already in a friendship or relationship. Like, that's accurate, right? Yeah, that's accurate. Okay, thanks. It's just like keeping it human and casual is one thing, and just enjoying the people you meet. And one other thing I'll say about that, Jay, with players specifically, is that I try to always be learning about this very complex game that they play. So when I go up to a Juan Soto in the clubhouse, it's not always for something newsy. Often it's for like, hey, I'm not writing this, but how did you approach that at bat? I'm really interested. And I think taking people seriously is important. I'm not looking at you as just a vessel to give me news. I'm looking at you as a human being who might teach me something interesting.
Hi, guys. This is Jay Horwitz. This Friday, I'm going to be at the Mets house having a live conversation with the great Mookie Wilson starting at 12:45. We'll be talking about baseball and cooking. Mookie comes at every block party cooking his ribs and chicken and pies here at Citi Field. So if you want to find out about cooking and baseball, come and see us 12:45 to 1:15 in the Mets house this Friday. I hope to see you then. And after that, Mookie will be doing an appearance there in the afternoon. Jay Horwitz special edition with Amazing Conversations with my longtime friend, Andy Martino, now of SNY, formerly of the Daily News. Before we start, I was reminiscing when I mentioned your name. You know what comes to mind when I see you and think of you? Go back about 2012 or 2013 when you, Christy Ackard, Andy, and Auntie McCarron used to sit in Foley's for every fundraiser we had for my late dear friend Shannon Forde. I don't think you guys missed one, and the respect you gave us, and I mean, gave her and support everything that we did. So isn't it kind of funny? Next year it'll be 10 years that Shannon passed away, which is kind of crazy. But I just, you were there for, you and Christy and Anthony. We always sat at a little table in Foley's and near everything that we did was, didn't forget that at all. Not at all.
Well, I always look, that wasn't a hardship or a sacrifice to show up for Shannon, obviously, and for you, secondarily to Shannon and that too, because we may do our little battles over the course of a year in our different roles, or did at that time, which is normal. But the human element there is, I always felt, Jay, that the most important thing is to remember that everyone around you is a human being, and pretty much everyone around you is a good person. So showing up for people is the easy part of this job. Jeez, but thanks for saying
No,
that.
I just remembered. Andy, so starting about 2010 and 9, you entered in the Inquirer. You're a writer most of your life until 2018, covering the Mets and the Yankees. Tell me about the transition. I mean, can I call you an insider? Is that a bad name?
It's so. Sometimes I feel like quite the outsider, but I'm trying. You can call me insider is a weird word that came to replace reporter, but you can
Right.
call me whatever you want.
But how was the transition for you going from the print media to what covering the Mets and the Yankees? Covering one team is tough. Two teams has got to be extraordinarily hard.
Yeah, I do like the coverage on that point, Jay. I love. To me, it feels like just two teams because the normal way that I think sometimes people try to get ahead in the media business now is through that national insider kind of job, like Ken Rosenthal or Jeff Passan, and
Right.
those guys obviously do a great job breaking transactions and doing other things, writing great stories. But I like the personal relationship so much that I wouldn't actually want to expand what I do beyond two teams like tops, right? Because I feel like one advantage that I have is I know the people inside both those organizations so well as human beings and have friends in there and people who it's just people who will take care of you for information, but that's not even the main point. Like I love being able to really go deep on two organizations rather than have to do 30. So that part is great. The transition from print, part of that's by necessity, and I'm really lucky that SNY was there to kind of nurture me along on the broadcasting side. But when I walked into the New York Daily News office in 2008 to interview for the internship, Jay, it was this majestic place with all the old front and back pages framed as you walked in, and everybody's wearing a
Dick
suit.
Young, Red Foley, Jack Lang.
Yeah, and literally, Vic Ziegel and Bill Gallo were in the office, these icons, when I went to interview. So, and I could go on with the big names. So anyway, long story short, the Daily News still publishes, but there isn't even a newsroom anymore. So one has to kind of ride the wave of where can you even get a job, right? So I'm fortunate to have one, and one that I love. But part of that, I took a buyout from the News when it felt like if I don't take a buyout now, this is 2015 or 16. If I don't take a buyout now, they might tell me when to leave. So
but you created this position when you got to SNY.
Yeah,
there wasn't this kind of position, right? I mean,
that's right. They didn't have a full-time insider. It really goes back, Jay. Honestly, the history of why I can do this and cover the Yankees and the Mets as a reporter with some objectivity and criticism, even for SNY. You were there and I wasn't. But for what I understand, the genesis of SNY was Fred Wilpon wanting it to be a legit sports network,
100%,
and not a house
100%,
organ. Yeah,
100%.
So that created an opportunity when I was the beat writer for the Daily News and then later a columnist. I would go on the shows. So SNY was really cool. Brad Como there and Steve Rabb and others nurturing me in as a newspaper guy. Come on in for a show. Remember, we had Daily News Live, so that was a natural way to do it. But they would have me do stuff when I was still working at the paper, so they knew me, and I had opportunities there. And the reason they're willing to have a journalist on at that time is, I think, because Fred wanted it to be, like I said, a legit place where people got it straight, and not like, Yes does a really good job of being the Yankee network, but I don't think that's what Fred wanted SNY to be.
No. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't you break, the Soto contract? You wouldn't listen to MLB Network, and that night, where would you really, not the number one, maybe two, in breaking that story?
Yeah, I was right there with that. And the Alonso one, we're fortunate to be out front with. And so that's the nuts and bolts of the job, is being first with transactions. And that's important. But, I think if those get you an audience to tell deeper stories also through the course of the year, that's kind of.
But you do other things. You still write columns for them, so it's just not that.
Yeah.
What did you make when Adrian Woj, I'm going to call him Woj, quit? The pressure of having your phone on all the time. Do you feel that pressure to you that if I don't have my phone on, I'm going to miss something?
Yeah.
I know you have young kids. Is it tough to balance it out for you?
Yes, it is. It's not tough that they pay me to go to a ballpark and that's my work day, and I keep that in perspective. But certainly, like Jay, the part of the job that is probably most time consuming is that round the clock responsibility, particularly in the off season, because as you well know, a team can make a transaction in the middle of the night, and so I have to wake up and deal with that if that were to happen. I mean, I've been used to that for a long time. I remember when you guys signed David Wright when I was at the Daily News in the middle of the night and having to react. Someone told Ed Coleman at like 3 a.m.
That was after dinner we had for Shannon. We sitting in the diner.
That's right. That's right. It was that same night. Wow.
We're sitting in the diner and came over to Ed Coleman. We love Ed to death. Let me say it's a nice way. Ed hasn't broken many stories in his career, but a great guy. And I didn't even know about it until I read it. But I mean, the pressure's got to be there, though.
It is. And Woj was sick of that, I understand. Also, he had this goes back a little probably to what I was talking about with the two teams versus the 30. I am round the clock on Yankees and Mets and responsible for that. And that is a busy part of my job. But when the Dodgers or the Padres or the Cubs or whoever does something, I don't have to worry about it at all. Unless Jacob deGrom signing with the Rangers or, unless it's a very New York oriented thing. So I think that keeps it a little bit more reasonable. So my responsibility is to get to a point with the Yankees and Mets organizations where if they're doing something, if I'm not first, at least I know I can make a call or two and catch up real fast and we can go on the air. So it's okay.
Listen, I don't want to give away trade secrets, but it's all about, communications and relationships. How do you build those relationships that like you said, I might not be one, but I will be two. And you built those relationships with the top people in both organizations for as long as I've known you. Any secret? How do you do? How do you have the trust that you're not going to screw anybody? What's the secret? Without no trade secrets, but what? How
Yeah.
do you approach that?
Well, number one, I just approach it as human relationships. I'm authentically interested in getting to know people. I honestly will say so. If you happen to be in a front office, I don't want to just be a taker. I don't want the relationship to be purely transactional. I want to. I'm. Who wouldn't? Why wouldn't you want to know people? I think one of the greatest things about being in baseball, Jay, whether it's team side like you or media side like me, it's just the people you meet. There's so many interesting people that work in this game. It's interesting human beings from all over the world and different stories. So I like to get to know people first to the point where um, maybe it's like, oh my God, can you please confirm for me that you just signed uh, Justin Verlander or whoever? No, it's like, hey, we're already talking. We're already in a friendship or relationship. Like, that's accurate, right? Yeah, that's accurate. Okay, thanks. It's just like keeping it human and casual is one thing, and just enjoying the people you meet. And one other thing I'll say about that, Jay, with players specifically, is that I try to always be learning about this very complex game that they play. So when I go up to a Juan Soto in the clubhouse, it's not always for something newsy. Often it's for like, hey, I'm not writing this, but how did you approach that at bat? I'm really interested.
Right.
And I think taking people seriously is important, and not just like I'm not looking at you as just a vessel to give me news. I'm looking at you as a human being who might teach me something interesting.
And I know, and don't get me wrong when I answer this. Sometimes the fans will come back at you if what you said doesn't happen the same day or the same
Right.
time. Do you? How do you react when somebody will write, "Well, damn, Martino, we got it wrong again"? Most of the time, you get it right, but how do you react when somebody
Well,
says something like that?
that's interesting. I'd say the honest answer, Jay, is like a human being where you react to it differently at different times. The full context of that is I think it's gotten easier and easier over the years to put social media in a place where you just don't worry about it, because I think it used to be like fun. And I think a lot of the nice people left Twitter X, at least, for reasons that we won't get into on your podcast. And so when something's said on Twitter, for the most part, I just think it's like, well, it's a toxic place. And what really comforts me in humanity on this front is like 9.9 times out of 10 when I meet a Mets fan, it happens all over because Mets fans are so passionate,
Right.
whether it's at Citi Field or in walking around Manhattan or anywhere else in life. They're great and they're nice and they want to tell you how much they appreciate the hard work you do, and they want to know what you know about the team. And I like love that. It's a privilege. This is not BS. It's a privilege to be in a position, to find myself in a position of, you care about the team and I can tell you something about it from the inside as a reporter. So I love interacting with fans. That's the way I look at it. I like interacting with fans. It's great. And then this little sliver of them that are nasty on social media, well, that's too bad, but that's not the representative.
And you really expand your portfolio. You do baseball tonight, and occasionally you'll be on a post game show. I mean, is that something you want to keep expanding for the future? Going forward.
You
You like
know, I love everything we do on TV because that's collaborative. Writing's solitary and reporting's kind of solitary. Like when you're on the road, you're around your competitors. It's not collaborative. So putting together a TV show as these great producers and editors and all these people are like, you're working together with them on something, which is fun. But I'm okay on TV, passable, but I think the main talent that I would like to think I bring to the table is writing. I think that's why SNY hired me. I came up in papers. I'm writing books. I love doing that. So that's probably where I'm personally the most like ambitious to keep trying to get better and better, is on the writing side.
speaking of, you've written two books. Cheated was about the Astros episode a couple of years ago, and the Yankee Way. Let me talk about the Yankee. I was sending on Brian Cashman, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you? I don't know Brian that well, but to get the access you did, that had to be a coup for you, right?
Yeah, that was tough too. He really made me sweat. We have a good relationship. I think he finds my coverage to be fair, and we just know each other for over many years. You just from being around, And I thought, hey, I'd like to write a book about your time running. You're the longest tenured GM in the most storied franchise in global sports, probably. Sorry, Jay, the Mets are getting there, but you know what I mean.
We're getting there.
Yeah, you are, and I truly believe you are. That's a separate
Yeah.
conversation. But at that time, that was my thought to Cashman, and he was very reluctant to talk. You know how it is in baseball. Do you remember when someone wrote a book about Sandy when he was the GM, and people thought like, "Oh, Sandy wrote a book."
He wrote a book. That guy wrote the
Yeah.
same book about me too. Steve Ketman.
Did he work with you on that?
Yeah, he wrote. He wrote it. Yeah,
Oh, I
I
didn't
didn't
know
get to be a bestseller, Andy. Next one.
So I think baseball people are really sensitive to like, well, people are going to think I'm writing a book and taking a victory lap or something. And I had to get past that with Brian. And I had to promise him that I'd be really clear in marketing it, that this is not Cashman's book. This is my book. I'm a reporter. I'm doing it. He just was interviewed. And I'd like to think that the human relationship building over many years is how I got the access ultimately, because I think I've been proven trustworthy. That doesn't mean you write everything he wants you to write, but that means when he reads the paper or my story online the next day in my daily coverage, he thinks, yeah, no, that was accurate. That was fair. That's what you go for. So I'd like to think that helps.
Did he have any reaction after the book came out, Andy, or no? I mean, did he ever say anything?
He was very glad that some people who had gone unsung had gotten credit. Like there's a guy named Bill Livesey who actually briefly worked for the Mets in the early 2000s. Right. But he was like a longtime player development guy for the Yankees who is behind a lot of their philosophies and ideas to this day, the stuff he did. And a lot of people give Stick Michael all the credit, and he deserves credit, but there were others in the organization that did a lot, and it wasn't really ever publicized. So the one piece of feedback I got from Cashman was that he was glad that some people who he'd felt were unsung got the stories told.
So you started in 2010, right? You were there for R.A. Dickey's 20.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's in a nice way. You used to drive me crazy that year because you developed such a great relationship with R.A. that a lot of the times I had to read your story, your column, to find out. Well, listen, I gave you credit for that. Did I say anything to you? Listen, I gave you credit.
No, you never gave me a hard time for that.
For the relationship, but R.A. was one of the most unusual characters that I've ever dealt with. Wrote a book, was on 60 Minutes, swam across the Mississippi River,
Oh, yeah.
whatever he did, and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. But
Yeah.
I mean, every time it was exclusive with R.A., Andy Martino had it.
Hey, look, that's the job, right? I mean, no, you never gave me. I don't recall you giving me a hard time for that sort of thing. That's probably an example of you'd rather something be a little bit different, but you tip your cap to like at least I'm not making stuff up or whatever, right? RA was just a great. That's what I was talking about before. The people you meet, you just mentioned how interesting he was, and news that you might get from somebody is secondary to the relationship, and it just you know these people, so news comes out. News isn't rocket science, right? All news is something that's going on. So if an R.A. Dickey might say, I can't. I feel like even all these years later, I can't just like get into the weeds on how people tell you what and how stories go.
But I remember one year. Remember when he had plantar he hurt his foot and had to go to a doctor who was going to miss a start. You had it first.
Yeah, that sounds right. So,
yeah.
That's the competitive aspect of the job, and you develop whatever sources you can, and sometimes you're right. It's it's adversarial to the PR staff, but you never did I ever recall gave me a hard time about something like that because you understood that was our job to try to get that stuff first, right?
Yeah. Another mutual friend we have is my good buddy and your good buddy, Terry Collins. How did your relationship with Terry develop? You had him for a couple of years, but working in SNY together, you develop a friendship. One of the most genuine, decent guys I've ever met.
Yeah, he really is. Another person I'm lucky to know, and obviously you are too. And how did it develop? You're the beat writer. You're just around a lot, and I'd like to think that I'm fair about manager moves as a goal, at least for mine, to be like, instead of having a tone of like, why'd you pinch hit for that guy? Be like, all right, I understand that you had a reason for something, and I probably don't even you know the game so much better than I do. I probably don't understand. Just help me understand. And Terry was great about that. He didn't get too defensive, so we could develop a thing in the early years where I could pop into his office and just be like, not second guessing you, why the lefty there? And he'd be like, oh, well, because so and so is coming up fourth the next inning and blah, blah, blah. You go, oh, well, that makes sense. And so we developed a good relationship that way. I think that was professional. And in New York, when you're managing, people are taking cheap shots every day on the radio or wherever, Twitter. So I'd like to think I didn't do that. And Terry's just a really easy guy to get along with. And what can I say? He just we were lucky to have him around. I feel like we kind of got one of the last real old school managers that have a drink with you and not everything was state secrets and just talk about baseball.
I used to ride to the park with him every day. Another good friend who I think is going to be in the Hall of Fame next year is Carlos Beltrán. For me, probably the most underappreciated Met who ever played. 7 years, great numbers, got hurt a little bit, but except for the one hellacious curveball by Adam Wainwright in 2006, he's not a better Met. And when I hear if he goes into the Hall of Fame, he's going to be as a Met and well deserved.
Yeah. Carlos, it's too bad that seems to stick in a lot of people's minds because you could make the case that that's the best free agent signing in the history of the franchise.
His numbers are incredible, just incredible.
And he held I know he had injuries in the knee thing in the middle, but he held up over the course of that contract well enough for you to get Zach Wheeler for him. Talk about a good contract. And just a really good person, but someone who I think would acknowledge that he came along in terms of how much of that he would show over the years. He could be pretty closed off at first, and it wasn't just the media. I remember David Wright telling me once within the past few years that when Beltrán signed with the Mets, it was like, oh, we're going to work out together, we're going to hang out. And then Carlos didn't really necessarily follow through on that with David. And David was like, oh, okay, we'll have a slightly more professional relationship. That's fine. But Carlos, I think, it's a high bar that you have to clear for him to open up to you and trust you. But once he does, he's incredible and outgoing. And I'm so glad that he's around the franchise now. And not just ceremonially, like as you know, he's having meaningful conversations with players and the front office. He was in uniform in the dugout during spring training games for the first time this year. And he's saying things to people that are really meaningful. He's seeing a guy swing and saying, hey, why don't you try this? People listen to this guy. I think he's been a tremendous help to Lindor in adjusting because they've had sort of similar paths with a bumpy first year as a Met in New York.
So Mike Piazza had a tough first year too, so he did that. What do you, speaking of David Wright, let's question July 19th, Hall of Fame, number retirement. You were with David, I think he just got hurt a year after you went off the beat. What do you remember about him as a player?
Yeah, I was lucky to have him through a long span because in 08, when I was an intern at the Daily News, he had a close relationship with Adam Rubin, the beat writer at that time. And so I got to know David as a very young player, kind of in the ascent. And then I was on the beat from 2010 on and around the Mets until his retirement. So I was on for the upswing and then that slow, unfortunately injury-riddled downswing of his career. And all I can say about him is, like, how is he that good of a person? What the hell is that? His goodness is so complete.
He's 100 times better person than he was a player, and that says a whole lot.
Yeah, it's like there's a million stories we could both tell. But, like, trying to apply my healthy journalist skepticism in the early years, I'm like, this guy can't really be for real, right? He's too good. And then as the years go by, you're just like, now he is. And he would do things. What's one example? Let me give you an example. Here's a good example. I wrote about this once. In early 2010s, Josh Foley, who's a great person as well, was in the locker room, and there was some kind of goofy-seeming reporter who we didn't recognize interviewing David. And Foley's locker was nearby, so he looks at me like, who's this guy? And I'm like, I don't know. And then we both start sort of maybe giggling a little bit. And Foley's a great guy, but we both got caught up in this moment. David finishes the interview, and when this reporter is out of earshot, he turns to me and lights me up. He's like, who are you to laugh at this guy? When you first came in, you were nervous, and I was nice to you. You were like, oh, Mr. Wright, can I have an interview? And now you're a big professional, but blah, blah, blah. And he was right. And I was like, you're right. And just like, wow, you are not only a good person, but you're much more mature than I am in a moment like this. And I just, that's one of many stories.
Andy, lastly, it's got to make you feel good. I've heard last year, like you said, Alonso and Soto. According to insider Andy Martino, the Mets are doing this, the Yankees are doing that. It's got to make you proud to hear those things for really creating your own positions, being one of the most respected baseball guys in the city now.
It's really fun. Like I don't. I mean, I appreciate the way you framed it. But for me, like I said before, being somebody who's in a position to tell fans who care so much about these teams what might be going on with that team is a tremendous privilege. And I still, like, the offseason is really a challenge every year because it's 24/7 and it's transactions, it's not games, and that's where you really earn your salary. But during the season, when I'm just getting paid to go to a game, and then you walk through the concourse to get some food and someone's like, what's going on with this or that? And you get to tell them. It's just really cool. I mean, that's a job. Sometimes you're like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. So
Yeah.
I'd like to think that that's where my satisfaction comes from, is that, like, I still get to do it. And I love the game, so it's fun. That's as simple as that.
And it's been a pleasure to be your friend for all these years, and I will see you around the ballpark soon. And thank you for your time, huh?
Can I give you a compliment since you gave me like a half hour of compliments?
Sure.
Okay, tell Vito not to cut this. The Mets are so lucky that you're still around. Not just the relationships you have with all these alumni, putting together that incredible crowning achievement of yours for now, the Old Timers Day, but just all the stuff you do in and out that helps them honor their history. But the instincts that you have on PR and comms are still second to none because of your time in this market. And they're lucky to still have you around as somebody who really knows. I would be lucky to have you to say, hey Jay, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because they're very lucky that you're still sitting there in a Mets office and still a Met. Hopefully
I
will be still
appreciate
for a
that,
long
Andy.
time.
And I'll see you around City Field soon, huh?
Okay, Jay.
Thanks for your time, man.
Bye.
Bye.